A bunch of stuff to talk about. So let's start with there's some things out there right now which I've tried to beat down that it just doesn't make sense to me that Huber's a fraud and the Inspector General report Horowitz, he's a fraud, that these guys are frauds and they're just head fakes, and I don't think that's true. What do your sources say about this?
Well, Greg, I'd like to thank you for having me back on your platform. I enjoy being with you. You're a good friend, and I enjoy the audience and the feedback I get from your audience. Greg, I can understand people being very, very upset about where we are, in a sense that we keep hearing, and you've put forward information, I've put forward information that there's a process ongoing. But people get very frustrated, as do both you and I, that we're not seeing people in orange jumpsuits with handcuffs on being perp walked, high-profile individuals. And when that frustration then starts to lead into calling certain people part of the problem, not part of the solution, the latest being some information that was put out or some hypotheses put out, some impressions put out by several folks in the print media and also over the internet, in particular about Huber and about who is the prosecutor from Utah who Sessions had brought in to oversee two things, Greg. That is the email investigation and how the FBI and the Department of Justice handled that of Hillary Clinton. And the other directive given to Huber when he was brought in was to investigate how the Justice Department under Obama, as well as the FBI, got embroiled and blew up this mushroom cloud of potential Russian collusion with the Trump campaign. Those were the two directives given Huber. Horowitz, who was a Department of Justice official, the Inspector General, who was appointed under the Obama administration. And there are people who say, well, Huber was also appointed under Obama. So really, these are both sheep in wolf's clothing, if you will, or wolves in sheep's clothing, I should say, that are part of the globalist syndicate, and they're frauds. The investigations are fake. Well, a couple things on that. I have to rely on the people that I've known for many years. As you know, I first got involved with healthcare policy at a national level, federal level, under the Reagan administration at the tail end of Ronald Reagan's administration. And since then, I had done some healthcare policy work. Not that they listened, Reagan did, because I was working with C. Everett Koop at the time and Jack Kemp and several others from the domestic policy side. But then I continued to try to help with healthcare policy, not that Bush 1 or Clinton or Bush 2 listened, and forget about Obama. He just sicked the IRS on me for outing the fact that Obamacare was two parts and it would lead to healthcare that was unavailable, unaffordable, and not quality oriented. We'll get to that later. But the point is, I've developed these contacts through my work in healthcare policy in a large number of federal agencies and a large number of federal departments because, for example, Treasury Department would be interested in healthcare policy. They get in touch with me, and through my work with the Treasury Department at the time, the Secret Service was under them, so I get to know some Secret Service people and then say, hey, the FBI has some questions on healthcare policy issues, and I get to know some folks at the FBI and the train with the Pentagon and the intelligence agencies and the like. So over the past 30 years, I've developed this network of folks I consider to be freedom fighters behind the curtain that have been fighting the deep state and if you will, the criminal banking syndicate, the globalists, if you will. And there's been this civil war that's been ongoing in our government for decades. It's actually escalated since the inauguration or election inauguration of Donald Trump. So when I pushed this information in front of my contacts in a number of different departments, a number of different agencies, about Horowitz, the Inspector General of the Department of Justice, about Huber, this prosecutor that Sessions brought on board to monitor, again, Greg, not to be repetitious, but this is very important because this goes at the crux of the criticism of Huber. He was directed to look at the email investigation of the FBI and the Department of Justice of Hillary Clinton and her emails and her servers. And in addition to that, he was directed to look at how this all blew up about Russian collusion with the Trump campaign and the Department of Justice under Obama and the FBI.
And hold on, let me just get in here with it. They're talking about the Uranium One deal, which is a giant treasonous fraud. But that's a whole other case with Dennis Campbell. They're talking about the Clinton Foundation. That's a whole fraud. That's not a charity. That's a whole nother case. That's a whole fraud. You're talking about the arming the rebels. That's a whole nother treasonous fraud. The rebels, the ISIS and Al Qaeda. Flying plane loads. That's another case. Flying plane loads of pallets of C-130s of cash into Iran for a deal that was never signed. That's yet another huge case. You have multiple huge cases, not just one case. So you're talking about a very narrow thing that Huber was tasked to do. Keep going. Your sources say.
And they say that Huber and Horowitz are not fighting on the globalist side, period. And that's universal across my contacts. And these are contacts that I know for many years, based on the information and end results that I've personally seen, that these folks have been fighting against the deep state for many years. So again, they've never pointed to somebody and say this person is okay when in fact they're not. And I believe in these two instances, Horowitz and Huber, I don't think they're wrong. Here's why I say this, Greg. Let's go back to January of 2018. A year ago. Horowitz, the Inspector General of the Department of Justice, was going to present information on January 15th to Congress, some draft reports, about the problems in the Obama Department of Justice and FBI and related agencies. On January 12th, and Paul Sperry reported this, and I also believe Chad Pergram, who is a producer for Fox, who I believe is one of the best correspondents on Capitol Hill, in spite of Fox. He presented information that actually Horowitz submitted that information on January 12th. It was several days after that all of a sudden Devin Nunes stepped forward into the spotlight and said, based on information we've received, here are the problems that have occurred in the Department of Justice and in the Department of Justice and the FBI. That just wasn't coincidence, I was told at the time. That Nunes had the power to come forward based on the information that Horowitz had presented. And let's face it, if it wasn't for Horowitz, we would not know about the text messages between Strzok and Page.
About the media leak. The media leak strategy.
Right, the media leaks.
The media leak strategy. I mean, they involve the press. This is why the press isn't covering it. We brought this up on your show, Operation Freedom. And it's my contention that the reason why there's a blackout is because they were part of the treason, the sedition, the crime. They were part of the leak strategy. And Strzok is a number 2 in the FBI in counterintelligence. He's the deputy. He's not a small player. And Lisa Page is a high-ranking attorney. Go ahead.
Greg, since Horowitz has been on the scene, there have been 26 high-level Department of Justice, FBI officials that have either been fired, they have resigned, they have been put in other offices because they're under internal investigation based on their actions. Greg, that's never happened in our country's history.
That's right. It's huge. That's just this.
And again, this is related to what, let's take something current that people might say, well, that was months ago. That's not now. Okay. What came out last week, Greg?
The Clinton Foundation is not.
There were 19,000 text messages between Strzok and Page that went missing, right? And that were deleted by Mueller's team. And Greg, who found them and presented them saying, oh, no, we got them back? It was the Inspector General's office. Horowitz.
Yeah.
So if Horowitz is in the bag, why in the world are there 26 officials that have, and remember his testimony in front of Congress, he spoke about recommending people for prosecution, correct?
Oh, yeah.
So if he's part of the problem, why is he recommending McCabe be prosecuted? casting aspersions upon Comey. I mean, and remember, Horowitz has another report coming out.
Yeah, on the fraudulent documents used for FISA.
Right. Now with Huber, here's where people got wound up about Huber. On December 5th, he was going to testify along with several other folks in front of the government oversight or the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. And that testimony was canceled because of the pomp and circumstance for the burial and memorial service of the globalist George H.W. Bush.
Yeah, I want to talk about the postcards later, but go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
The letters.
So then it gets moved to the 13th, a week and a day later.
Yeah.
Okay. And everybody, Huber's going to testify. Huber's going to testify. Okay. And my question at the time was, what's he going to testify about? Because the hearing is supposed to be about the Clinton Foundation, and he was tasked with the Hillary Clinton emails, specifically that, and how the FBI and the Department of Justice investigated those, and he was tasked with the with how the Russian collusion with the Trump campaign story, blew up. So at the time, I was saying, what's he going to talk about with the foundation? Because that's a separate investigation, as is, as you mentioned, the Benghazi investigation, as well as the Iran deal investigation. What happened there? I mean, these are all separate,
and they're huge.
Okay, so I'm thinking, well, what the heck is Huber going to say? But I believe that was misdirection, and here's why. Because I believe you watched the hearing. I watched it live, Greg. And I was stunned at the amount of information that was presented by the two what are called whistleblowers, Moynihan and Doyle. And I believe what happened was they used Huber as a distraction.
They never intended him to testify.
Part of the art of war is deception.
Yeah.
Right?
They never intended for Huber to testify. They always intended to have him.
And then it came out at the hearing why Huber didn't testify. And I believe it was Mark Meadows, the chairman of that committee, who said, and it was only after Moynihan and Doyle dropped an enormous, it was a nuclear bomb. Oh. And what they said, they said many things that were really devastating to the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation. And we'll get into that. But the bomb that they dropped was, they said they were aware of an active criminal investigation of the Clinton Foundation that was being run through the FBI and in particular the Little Rock field office. And with that, Meadows came forward and goes, well, then I guess it's apparent why Prosecutor Huber didn't show up, because if there's an active criminal investigation,
can't talk.
A prosecutor cannot be involved in a hearing in a situation that's discussing issues that could well be related to a criminal prosecution. And it goes back to something that we said earlier in this interview, is that the last thing anybody wants is to compromise the ultimate end result of a prosecution because somebody jumped the gun a little bit, and where the defense, because let's face it, right, the Clintons and the Obamas and the Bushes and whomever, they're going to have the best legal team around. It's going to make O.J. Simpson's defense team, the dream team, look like a bunch of chumps.
Yeah.
They're going to have the best people, the most criminal minds in the legal industry defending them. And they're going to point at anything to try to get their clients off. So
a mistrial or whatever.
A mistrial, this information, and you know how they throw smoke and mirrors all over the place. and just because Huber's sitting in the same room that these guys are talking about an active, well, you had the prosecutor in the room and they were talking about an active criminal investigation of the Clintons. So the fact that this is all tainted and this is grounds for a mistrial, and I mean, you can just see it happening. So I believe there were two reasons why Huber didn't show. One, or several reasons. One, he was not going to present information because it's under investigation about the Clinton email situation and how it was investigated by the FBI, and he's not going to present information as it relates to the whole Russian hoax collusion thing, which he was tasked with, because this is about the Clinton Foundation. But I also believe he was used for misdirection, because what this did is this took the pressure off of Moynihan and Doyle. Let me tell you something. With the track record of whistleblowers coming forward, and let's face it, Barack Obama declared war on whistleblowers.
Hated them.
Hated them. I mean, he had the NSA specifically targeting them.
Yes.
Right? And then there was retribution to whistleblowers. I mean, just look at a schmo like me speaking about Obamacare and the problems with Obamacare and how half of it was hidden in the stimulus bill. You know, we had a deal, myself and my family had a deal with the IRS, right? So this is how they handle a civilian, let alone somebody who's employed by them, right? So what they did is, I think they focused, in part of deception, focusing on Huber, which gave Moynihan and Doyle an easy channel to come in with, get them out of harm's way, protect them, and get them in front of a televised hearing. Remember, Congress, and this was made incredibly apparent when Moynihan, who was really excellent, one of these whistleblowers, he looked at Meadows, and let's face it, they were getting heat from the Republican side as well as the Democrat side, right? Yeah. About, well, who are you guys to present? He said, look, I'm not going to present all of our documents to you folks because you can't prosecute anybody through Congress.